I stared at my phone in complete disbelief, reading the venue coordinator's email for the third time. "We're sorry, but your deposit was refunded last month per your sister's request." My sister Emma had stolen my wedding venue deposit $5,000 that took me 2 years to save. She'd convinced the venue I was having second thoughts and pocketed the refund herself. As my wedding was only 6 weeks away, I realized this wasn't just theft. This was sabotage. Before we dive into how I exposed Emma's lies and got my revenge, I'm curious, have you ever had family betray you when you least expected it? Drop a comment below sharing your story, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking family drama revelations. Trust me, this story gets way more twisted than you think. The morning after discovering Emma's betrayal, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop coffee growing cold, as I pieced together a puzzle I never wanted to solve. My fiancé Jake had left for work early, giving me space to process what felt like a nightmare. But as I started digging deeper, I realized the wedding venue theft was just the tip of the iceberg. I called Moonrise Manor the venue where Jake and I planned to say our vows. Sarah, the coordinator, sounded genuinely confused when I explained the situation. "Your sister was very convincing," she said apologetically. "She had all your information, your booking number, your full name, even details about your dress. She said you'd been crying every night about the wedding stress and wanted to postpone indefinitely." The specificity of Emma's lies made my stomach churn. How did she know about my dress? About the late-night anxiety I'd only shared with my mom? I hung up and immediately called my mother, my hands shaking as I dialed. "Oh, sweetheart." Mom's voice was strained when I told her about the venue. "Emma came by last week asking all sorts of questions about your wedding plans. She said she wanted to help plan a surprise for you. I thought it was sweet you two haven't been close lately." That was an understatement. Emma and I had grown apart after she dropped out of college 3 years ago, moving back home while I worked 2 jobs to afford my own apartment. She'd always been the golden child, charming, beautiful, and seemingly effortless at everything. But lately, she'd been different, bitter, resentful. "What exactly did you tell her?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Mom's pause spoke volumes. "Everything, honey." She seemed so interested. "Your dress details, the venue, your budget, even your banking information when she offered to help with vendor payments." My blood ran cold. Banking information. I immediately logged into my account, my worst fears confirmed as I scrolled through recent transactions. 3 unauthorized withdrawals over the past month, each for exactly $999, just under the $1,000 threshold that would trigger fraud alerts. Nearly $3,000 gone. Emma hadn't just stolen my venue deposit. She'd been systematically draining my wedding fund for weeks. I called my bank immediately, my voice steady, despite the rage building in my chest. The fraud department confirmed what I already knew: someone with access to my account information had been making strategic withdrawals using online banking. The transactions came from an IP address registered to my parents' house. While on hold for a supervisor, I remembered something else. 3 weeks ago, Emma had asked to borrow my laptop for job applications while visiting. She'd insisted on privacy, closing my bedroom door while she worked. I'd thought nothing of it then, but now I realized she'd likely accessed my saved banking passwords and gathered every piece of information she needed to steal from me systematically. The bank supervisor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was thorough and sympathetic. "Ms. Sterling, we can begin the fraud investigation immediately, but I have to warn you, cases involving family members are complicated. Do you want to press charges?" I hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then I thought about Emma's smug face at last Sunday's family dinner, how she'd made casual comments about my expensive wedding dreams, and suggested I was living beyond my means. She'd been planning this all along. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want to press charges." After hanging up with the bank, I sat in my quiet apartment and felt the full weight of Emma's betrayal. This wasn't just about money, though. Nearly $8,000 was devastating 6 weeks before my wedding. This was about trust, family, and the realization that my own sister had been plotting against me for months. I called in sick to work and spent the day creating a timeline. Emma's questions about my wedding plans, her sudden interest in helping, her request to use my laptop, her comments about my finances. Every interaction now felt calculated and malicious. But what broke my heart most was calling Jake and hearing his voice when I explained everything. He was furious, supportive, and devastated all at once. "Savannah, we'll figure this out," he promised. "But I can't believe Emma would do this to you, to us." That evening, Emma texted me like nothing had happened. "Hey sis, want to grab dinner this weekend? I have some exciting news to share." I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something cold and determined settle in my chest. Emma thought she'd won. She thought she'd destroyed my wedding and gotten away with thousands of dollars while maintaining her innocent facade. She had no idea that I was just getting started. I spent the next 72 hours in what Jake called detective mode, building an airtight case against Emma. My laptop's browser history revealed everything she'd accessed, not just my bank account, but my email, my wedding planning folders, even my private messages with vendors. She'd screenshotted contracts, copied vendor contact information, and methodically gathered every detail she needed to impersonate me. The most chilling discovery came when I checked my emails sent folder. Emma had sent messages from my account to 3 other vendors, attempting to cancel my photographer and caterer, using the same sob story about wedding stress and second thoughts. Fortunately, both vendors had strict cancellation policies requiring phone calls and written confirmation, so her attempts had failed. But the intent was clear. Emma wasn't just stealing money. She was trying to destroy my entire wedding. Armed with evidence, I decided to confront her, but not the way she expected. Instead of an emotional family drama, I planned something far more devastating: public humiliation backed by undeniable proof. That Saturday morning, I texted Emma back. "Dinner sounds perfect. Why don't we meet at Cafe Luna at 7? Mom and Dad can come too. I'd love for the whole family to hear your exciting news." Emma's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Amazing! I can't wait to tell everyone. This is going to be such a special evening." I spent that afternoon preparing carefully. I printed every piece of evidence: bank statements, highlighting the unauthorized transaction screenshots of my laptop's browser history, showing Emma's access copies of the fraudulent emails sent from my account, and most importantly, a recorded phone call with Sarah from Moonrise Manor, detailing exactly how Emma had manipulated her into releasing my deposit. I also prepared something else: a resignation letter from Emma's part-time job at our family friend's boutique. Emma had been working there for 6 months, and I strongly suspected her theft hadn't started with me. At 6:30, I arrived at Cafe Luna early and requested a corner table with 4 chairs. The restaurant was busy enough to provide background noise, but quiet enough that our conversation would be clearly audible to our family. I ordered a glass of wine and weighted my folder of evidence beside me. Mom and Dad arrived first, looking happy and expectant. "Emma said she has big news," Mom said excitedly. "I'm hoping she's finally ready to go back to school, or maybe she's found a serious job." Dad nodded, checking his watch. "She's been doing better lately, more confident spending money on herself. I think she's finally getting her life together." The irony was almost too much to bear. Emma's newfound confidence came from stealing my hard-earned money, and my parents were proud of her for it. Emma arrived 10 minutes late, practically glowing with excitement. She wore a new designer dress I recognized from an expensive boutique downtown, easily a $600 piece that should have been far beyond her part-time salary. She hugged everyone enthusiastically before sitting across from me. "So," Mom said eagerly, "what's this exciting news?" Emma beamed, reaching into her purse. "Well, I've been saving really carefully and I finally have enough money to go back to school." She pulled out an envelope. "I applied to the fashion design program at Parsons and I got accepted. I can start this fall." Dad's face lit up. "Emma, that's incredible. How much have you saved?" "Almost $15,000, Emma said proudly. "I've been so disciplined about budgeting and picking up extra shifts. I even started a small online business selling vintage clothes." The lies flowed so smoothly from her lips that I almost admired her audacity. Almost. That's amazing, sweetheart, Mom said, tears in her eyes. I'm so proud of how hard you've worked. I took a slow sip of my wine and opened my folder. Emma, that's really impressive. $15,000 in just a few months? Most people would struggle to save that much working part-time retail. Emma's smile flickered slightly, but she recovered quickly. Like I said, I've been really disciplined, and the online business has been doing better than expected. I nodded thoughtfully. What kind of vintage clothes do you sell? I'd love to see your inventory. Oh, it's mostly casual pieces. Nothing you'd be interested in. Emma's voice carried a slight edge now. I smiled sweetly. Try me. I'm always looking for unique pieces. What's your business called? Maybe I can find you online. The color drained from Emma's face. It's still pretty small. I mostly sell through local groups. Our parents looked back and forth between us, sensing the shift in atmosphere, but not understanding why. I decided it was time to end Emma's performance. That's funny, I said casually, pulling out my printed bank statements. Because according to my records, you've been running a different kind of business, one that involves stealing money from your sister's wedding fund. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's face went completely white, and she started shaking her head before I'd even finished speaking. Savannah, what are you talking about? She whispered. I spread the evidence across the table methodically. I'm talking about the $5,000 venue deposit you stole by pretending to be me. I'm talking about the $3,000 in unauthorized withdrawals from my bank account. I'm talking about the fraudulent emails you sent from my account trying to cancel my other wedding vendors. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dad leaned forward, studying the papers with increasing horror. This is crazy, Emma said desperately. I would never, why would you even think, because I have proof. I interrupted, pulling out the screenshots of my laptop's browser history. These show exactly when you accessed my accounts using my computer. This shows the IP address of every fraudulent transaction, all traced back to Mom and Dad's house. And this, I placed the recording device on the table, is Sarah from Moonrise Manor, explaining exactly how you convinced her to refund my deposit. I pressed play, and Sarah's voice filled the stunned silence. She knew everything about the wedding. She said Savannah had been crying every night and wanted to postpone indefinitely. She was very convincing and had all the right information. Emma's desperate denials crumbled as the evidence mounted. Our parents stared at her in shock and growing horror as the full scope of her betrayal became clear. Emma, Dad's voice was barely above a whisper. Tell me this isn't true. But Emma's silence was answer enough. She sat, frozen tears streaming down her face as her carefully constructed lies disintegrated around her. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and felt something I'd never experienced before. Not just anger or hurt, but a cold, calculating satisfaction. This was only the beginning of Emma's reckoning. The aftermath of that dinner was swift and brutal. Dad drove Emma home in stony silence while Mom stayed with me, crying and apologizing repeatedly for giving Emma access to my personal information. But as devastating as the family confrontation had been, I knew it was just the opening move in a much larger game. The next morning, I received a call that changed everything. Ms. Sterling, this is Detective Monica Rivera with the Fraud Division. Your bank forwarded your case to us, and after reviewing the evidence, we'd like to meet with you this week. Detective Rivera was sharp, thorough, and surprisingly sympathetic when we met Tuesday morning. She spread Emma's evidence across the conference room table with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen this type of family fraud before. What makes this case interesting, she explained, is the sophistication of the theft and the clear premeditation. Your sister didn't just steal impulsively, she planned this over months. That suggests either experience or coaching. Coaching, I asked. Someone taught her how to stay under fraud detection limits, how to access accounts without triggering security alerts. These aren't amateur moves. Detective Rivera leaned back in her chair. Have you considered that you might not be her first victim? That question haunted me as I drove home. If Emma had been stealing from family before, who else had she targeted? And why was she so confident she'd get away with it? The answer came from an unexpected source, my cousin Marcus. Marcus called me Wednesday evening, his voice tight with anger. Savannah, I heard about Emma through the family grapevine. I need to tell you something, but I want your word that you'll keep this between us for now. My stomach sank. What happened? Last year, when Grandpa had his stroke, Emma was helping Grandma with his finances while he was in the hospital. Grandma asked Emma to handle some bill payments and account transfers. Marcus paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. After Grandpa recovered and took over his accounts again, he found discrepancies. Small amounts spread over several months, about $4,000 total. Marcus, why didn't anyone tell me? Because Grandpa didn't want to destroy the family. Emma cried, apologized, said she'd made bookkeeping errors, and promised to pay it back gradually. Grandpa believed her and made us all promise not to tell anyone else. He didn't want to ruin her reputation over what he thought was just poor judgment. The pattern was becoming clear. Emma had been practicing on our elderly grandfather, learning how to manipulate family members and steal without detection. When that worked, she'd escalated to targeting me. Marcus, I said carefully, how would you feel about Emma facing actual consequences this time? Honestly, I've been waiting for someone to hold her accountable. Grandpa's too kind to press charges, but watching her steal from you while planning your wedding, that's beyond forgiveness. By Thursday, my coalition was growing. Marcus connected me with our cousin Lisa, who worked as a paralegal and had suspected Emma of theft for years. Lisa had noticed Emma's suddenly expensive lifestyle at family gatherings, designer clothes, expensive jewelry, frequent vacations despite her minimal income. I've been keeping notes, Lisa admitted when we met for coffee. Call it professional paranoia, but Emma's spending never matched her earnings. I suspected she was either dealing drugs or stealing, and honestly stealing seemed more likely. Lisa's notes were incredibly detailed. She'd documented Emma's purchases, cross-referenced them with her known income, and even photographed some of the expensive items Emma flaunted at family events. It painted a picture of someone living far beyond their means through fraudulent income. But our most important ally came from the most unexpected place. Friday afternoon, I received a call from Jessica, the manager of Bella's boutique, where Emma worked part-time. Ms. Sterling, I hope you don't mind me calling. Emma listed you as an emergency contact when she was hired. I'm afraid I have some difficult news about her employment here. My heart started racing. What kind of news? We've discovered significant inventory discrepancies over the past 6 months. Expensive items missing cash register shortfalls, and customer payments that were processed but never deposited. We've been conducting an internal investigation, and Emma's shifts correlate with almost every incident. Jessica paused, then continued quietly. We also found evidence that Emma has been running unauthorized sales through her personal accounts, selling our merchandise online, and keeping the profits. When we confronted her yesterday, she quit immediately and refused to cooperate with our investigation. Are you planning to press charges? I asked. We want to, but we're a small business. Legal fees are expensive, and we're not sure we have enough evidence for a successful prosecution, unless what? Unless we're not the only victims. If there's a pattern of behavior, if other people are willing to come forward, it becomes a much stronger case. I felt a surge of dark satisfaction. Emma's house of cards wasn't just falling, it was collapsing spectacularly. That evening, I organized what I called the family meeting at Marcus's house. Present were Marcus, Lisa, Jessica from the boutique, and Detective Rivera, who'd agreed to attend in an advisory capacity. I'd also invited my parents, who arrived looking exhausted and devastated. Before we start, I said, looking around the room, I want everyone to understand what we're dealing with. This isn't just about my wedding money. Emma has been systematically stealing from family members and her employer for over a year. She's shown no remorse, no intention to make restitution, and no sign of stopping. Detective Rivera nodded. In my experience, this type of behavior escalates until external consequences force it to stop. Without legal intervention, Emma will likely target more family members or move on to identity theft, credit fraud, or more sophisticated crimes. Mom started crying again. She's my daughter. How do I choose between my children? Lisa leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Mrs. Sterling, you're not choosing between your children. You're choosing between enabling Emma's criminal behavior and protecting future victims, including Emma herself. Addiction to stealing is real, and she needs professional help that only court-mandated treatment can provide. Dad had been quiet throughout the meeting, but now he spoke up. What exactly are you asking us to do? I pulled out a prepared document. I'm asking each of you to file formal complaints with Detective Rivera. Marcus for Grandpa's stolen money, Jessica for the boutique theft, me for the wedding fraud. With multiple victims and clear evidence of escalation, Emma will face serious consequences that might actually motivate her to get help. And if we don't? Marcus asked. Detective Rivera answered. She continues stealing until she targets the wrong person or makes a mistake that results in federal charges. Better to address this now while it's still at the state level and treatment options are available. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Emma had counted on family loyalty and shame to protect her from consequences. She'd gambled that we'd prioritize keeping family secrets over seeking justice. She'd gambled wrong. One by one, my allies agreed to press charges. Even my parents, after hours of painful discussion, acknowledged that enabling Emma's behavior had only made it worse. As we signed the formal complaints, I felt something shifting inside me. This wasn't just about getting my wedding money back anymore. This was about justice, accountability, and ensuring that Emma's victims got the resolution they deserved. But Emma still had one more devastating surprise waiting for me. And when it came, it would test every alliance I'd built and force me to decide exactly how far I was willing to go for justice. Monday morning brought what I thought would be our final victory. Detective Rivera had scheduled Emma's arrest for Tuesday, and I felt the satisfaction of justice finally being served. But when my phone rang at 7 a.m., I knew something had gone terribly wrong. Savannah, we have a problem. Detective Rivera's voice was tense and professional. Emma's charges have been dropped. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. What do you mean, dropped? We have overwhelming evidence. Someone contacted the district attorney's office over the weekend. They claimed the family disputes were being weaponized and that the evidence was obtained through harassment and coercion. The DA's office is concerned about prosecuting what appears to be a civil family matter rather than criminal fraud. The words hit me like a physical blow. Who would say that everyone in our coalition agreed to press charges? There was a long pause. The complaint came from your father. I felt the world tilt beneath me. Dad had been reluctant at Friday's meeting, but he'd signed the complaint. He'd agreed that Emma needed consequences. He'd looked me in the eye and promised he supported holding her accountable. I'm going to call him right now, I said, already reaching for my clothes. Savannah, wait. There's more. Your father also provided the DA's office with what he claims is evidence that you've been harassing Emma and potentially falsifying documents to frame her. He suggested you're bitter about your wedding being postponed and are using the legal system for revenge. My hands started shaking. That's completely false. Emma stole from me, from Grandpa, from her employer. I believe you, Detective Rivera said firmly. But your father's intervention has created reasonable doubt about family motivation versus criminal intent. The DA won't move forward without stronger evidence or additional victims outside the family. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Dad had sabotaged our entire case. He'd chosen Emma over justice, over me, over Grandpa, over everyone she'd victimized. The betrayal felt even worse than Emma's theft because it came from someone I'd trusted completely. I called Marcus immediately, my voice shaking with rage and disbelief. Dad destroyed everything. He told the DA that I'm lying and harassing Emma. Marcus was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he said, "Savannah, I need to tell you something. Dad called me yesterday asking detailed questions about our evidence. He wanted to know exactly what we'd told the police, what documentation we had, how strong our case was. I thought he was just being thorough. He was gathering intelligence for Emma, I realized. He was planning this all along. There's something else. After our meeting Friday, Dad stayed late to talk to me privately. He said Emma had come to him crying, claiming you were trying to ruin her life over a misunderstanding. She told him she'd borrowed the money planning to pay it back, and that you were blowing everything out of proportion because you were stressed about the wedding. I felt sick. Emma had gotten to Dad first, spinning her web of lies and manipulation. She'd convinced him that I was the villain in this story, that she was the victim of my vengeful campaign. And Dad, wanting to believe his golden child could do no wrong, had chosen her story over the evidence. The next few hours brought a cascade of devastating news. Jessica from the boutique called to tell me she was withdrawing her complaint. "I'm sorry, Savannah, but your father contacted our store owner. He suggested that pursuing charges against Emma would result in bad publicity for our business and potentially expensive legal complications. My boss is too scared to proceed." Lisa called 30 minutes later. "I hate this, but I have to withdraw too. Dad threatened to cut me out of his will if I testified against Emma. He said I was being manipulated by you and that Emma just made some bookkeeping mistakes that didn't warrant destroying her future." By noon, our entire coalition had crumbled. Dad had systematically contacted every ally using a combination of threats, emotional manipulation, and flat-out lies to protect Emma from consequences. He'd convinced Jessica's boss that the boutique case was weak and would damage their reputation. He'd threatened Lisa financially. He told Marcus that pursuing charges would tear the family apart forever. When I called my parents' house that evening, Mom answered in tears. "Savannah, please just let this go. Your father says Emma's learned her lesson and she's promised to get help. She's going to pay back every penny gradually. Can't we just handle this as a family?" "Mom, Emma has been stealing from family for over a year. She destroyed my wedding, robbed Grandpa while he was in the hospital, and stole thousands from her employer. This isn't a family dispute, it's a crime spree. Your father says you're exaggerating because you're angry about the wedding stress. He says Emma just made some poor decisions and that everyone makes mistakes." I hung up feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Emma hadn't just stolen my money, she'd stolen my family's support system. Dad had chosen his favorite child over justice, and everyone else had fallen in line to avoid his wrath. That night, Jake held me while I cried tears of rage and frustration. "She's going to get away with everything," I sobbed. "Dad made sure of it. Emma will face no consequences and she'll probably steal from someone else within months." "Maybe," Jake said quietly, "but you exposed her methods and patterns to everyone who matters. Even if the legal system failed this time, Emma's reputation is destroyed. Family members know what she is now, even if they won't admit it publicly." But Jake's comfort felt hollow. Emma had won. She'd kept the stolen money, avoided all legal consequences, and maintained her position as the protected family favorite. Meanwhile, I was being painted as the vindictive sister who'd tried to destroy her sibling over money. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized this betrayal had taught me something crucial about my family dynamics. Dad had always protected Emma from consequences, and I'd been naive to think this time would be different. Emma's confidence in her immunity hadn't come from nowhere. It came from a lifetime of Dad rescuing her from accountability. But what Dad and Emma didn't know was that their victory was about to become their greatest mistake. Because tomorrow I was going to receive a phone call that would change everything and give me the ammunition I needed to destroy Emma's lies, once and for all. Tuesday morning's phone call came from the last person I expected, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, my elderly neighbor from my previous apartment complex. "Dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your new number from your mother when I mentioned I had some concerns about your sister Emma. I think there's something you need to know about what happened while you were living here." Mrs. Patterson was 83 years old, sharp as a tack, and had always been kind to me during the 2 years I lived in her building. She'd been like a grandmother figure, often inviting me for tea and asking about my wedding plans. "What kind of concerns?" I asked, though my stomach was already sinking. "Well, about 6 months ago, Emma started visiting you more frequently. She was always so charming, asking about my health and my late husband's military pension. One day, she mentioned that you'd asked her to help me with some banking tasks while you were busy with wedding planning." My blood went cold. "Mrs. Patterson, I never asked Emma to help you with anything." There was a long pause. "That's what I was afraid of. You see, I trusted her because she's your sister. She helped me set up online banking, said it would be more convenient for managing my pension deposits. She was so knowledgeable about computers, and I felt foolish for not understanding the technology." "What exactly did she help you with?" "Everything. She set up the accounts, showed me how to check my balance, even helped me pay some bills online. She said you'd recommended her because she'd been helping other elderly family members with their finances." Mrs. Patterson's voice began shaking. "But last week, when my nephew visited from out of state, he noticed some irregularities in my account statements." I grabbed a pen and paper, my hands trembling. "What kind of irregularities?" "Small withdrawals over the past 5 months. Always under $1,000, always labeled as account maintenance fees or service charges. My nephew is an accountant, and he said legitimate banks don't charge those types of fees. When we called the bank, they confirmed the withdrawals were made through online banking, but they weren't bank fees at all." The room started spinning. Emma hadn't just targeted family members, she'd been preying on vulnerable elderly people in my former building, using my name and reputation to gain their trust. "Mrs. Patterson, how much money was taken?" "Nearly $6,000 over 5 months. But that's not the worst part." She paused, and I could hear her taking a shaky breath. "My nephew insisted we report it to the police. When the detective investigated, she discovered Emma had been targeting several elderly residents in this complex. The total theft is over $28,000. I nearly dropped the phone. 28,000. There are 6 victims that we know of. Emma used the same method with everyone claimed she was helping at your request, set up their online banking, then systematically stole small amounts over months. She was careful to keep each theft under amounts that would trigger automatic fraud alerts." Mrs. Patterson continued, "The detective handling our case is Maria Santos. She said Emma's theft from elderly victims makes this federal elder abuse fraud, which carries much more serious penalties than simple theft. She's been trying to reach you for weeks, but Emma apparently gave everyone fake contact information for you." My mind was racing. This changed everything. Emma hadn't just been stealing from family, she'd been running an organized elder abuse scheme using my identity and reputation. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was federal criminal activity. "Mrs. Patterson, are the other victims willing to testify?" "Oh, yes, dear. We're all furious. Emma betrayed our trust and stole our fixed incomes. Mrs. Chen lost her medication money. Mr. Rodriguez couldn't pay his rent. We want justice, and we're not family members who might feel conflicted about pressing charges." I immediately called Detective Maria Santos, who confirmed Mrs. Patterson's story and much more. Emma had been running a sophisticated elder abuse operation for nearly 8 months, targeting seniors in 3 different apartment complexes. She'd stolen over $45,000 total and had been planning to expand to assisted living facilities. "The beautiful thing about this case," Detective Santos explained, "is that elder abuse fraud is prosecuted federally and family members can't interfere with federal investigations. Your father's attempts to protect Emma are irrelevant here. We don't need family cooperation when we have elderly victims and clear evidence." Detective Santos had been building her case for months, gathering bank records, interviewing victims, and tracing Emma's digital footprint across multiple theft locations. Emma's systematic approach and the large dollar amounts involved meant she was facing potential federal charges carrying 10 to 20 years in prison. "We've been waiting to arrest Emma because we wanted to ensure we had every victim and every piece of evidence," Detective Santos continued. Your information about the family thefts actually helps establish her pattern of behavior and shows escalation in her criminal activity. But Detective Santos saved the best news for last. We also discovered something interesting about your father's intervention in the local case. Emma had been paying him monthly amounts from her theft proceeds, claiming they were from her online business. Your father was unknowingly receiving stolen money and helping launder the proceeds of Emma's crimes. I felt a surge of dark satisfaction. Dad's efforts to protect Emma had actually made him an unwitting accomplice to federal crimes. His intervention wasn't just misguided family loyalty, it was obstruction of justice with potential money laundering implications. What happens next? I asked. Emma's arrest warrant was signed yesterday. We're executing it tomorrow morning. With federal charges, she won't be eligible for the kind of bail that allows wealthy family members to secure her release. She'll remain in custody until trial, unless she can post a significant federal bond. That evening, I called a meeting with my original coalition, Marcus, Lisa, and Jessica. When I explained the federal case and Emma's elder abuse scheme, the mood in the room shifted dramatically. "This is bigger than we thought," Marcus said quietly. "Emma wasn't just stealing from family, she was preying on vulnerable seniors using Savannah's identity." Lisa nodded, looking sick. "And Dad's been receiving stolen money from elderly victims. He's been profiting from Emma's crimes while protecting her from consequences." Jessica looked stunned. "She used the same methods at my boutique that she used with the elderly victims. Small amount systematic theft, staying under detection limits. This was never impulse stealing, this was organized criminal activity." We agreed to fully cooperate with Detective Santos and provide all our evidence to support the federal case. More importantly, we agreed to confront our family members about the reality of Emma's crimes and Dad's unwitting involvement. But as I prepared for Emma's arrest the next morning, I realized this victory came with its own painful cost. My family would never be the same. Dad's favoritism and Emma's manipulation had created a criminal conspiracy that would destroy relationships, shatter trust, and potentially result in decades of prison time. Emma had gambled that family loyalty would protect her from consequences. She'd never imagined that her crimes would escalate beyond family control into federal prosecution. Tomorrow she would learn that some actions have consequences that even Dad's protection couldn't prevent. Wednesday morning, I watched from my apartment window as two federal agents arrested Emma in my parents' driveway. She was still in her pajamas, completely unprepared for the reality that her criminal enterprise had finally caught up with her. Dad stood helplessly on the porch, no longer able to shield his favorite child from the consequences of her actions. The arrest made local news by evening. "Local woman charged with federal elder abuse fraud" ran as the headline, complete with Emma's mugshot and details about her sophisticated theft operation. The story mentioned that she'd stolen over $55,000 from elderly victims across multiple apartment complexes, using family connections to gain trust before systematically draining their accounts. My phone rang constantly that day, family members who'd believed Dad's story about Emma making bookkeeping mistakes, now calling in shock and horror. The federal charges made it impossible to pretend this was just family drama or youthful poor judgment. Aunt Carol called crying. "Savannah, I'm so sorry we didn't believe you. When your father said you were exaggerating, I thought maybe wedding stress was making you see things that weren't there. But elder abuse, stealing from seniors on fixed incomes, that's not a mistake, that's evil." Uncle Robert was furious. "Your father called me last week asking for character references for Emma, claiming she was being unfairly targeted. He made it sound like you were being vindictive over wedding money. I had no idea she'd been stealing from elderly people for months." But the most important call came from Grandpa himself. "Sweetheart." His voice was tired but determined. "I owe you an enormous apology. When your father told me Emma had learned her lesson and was paying back what she took, I wanted to believe him. But seeing these federal charges, understanding how she used my memory problems after my stroke to steal from me systematically, I realize I enabled her by staying quiet." Grandpa paused, then continued with strength in his voice. I'm calling Detective Santos today to provide a full statement about what Emma did to me. No more family protection, no more keeping secrets. Emma needs to face every consequence of her choices. The federal case moved quickly. Detective Santos had built such a comprehensive case that Emma's public defender recommended she accept a plea bargain rather than face trial. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, victim testimonies, digital forensics showing her systematic theft patterns, and even security camera footage of her visiting elderly victims' apartments. 3 weeks after her arrest, Emma pleaded guilty to federal elder abuse fraud conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. Her plea agreement included full restitution to all victims and a sentence of 6 years in federal prison, with no possibility of early release. The restitution requirements meant Emma had to surrender everything she'd bought with stolen money: the designer clothes, jewelry, electronics, even the money she'd planned to use for college. When that wasn't sufficient, Dad was forced to sell his investment accounts to cover the remaining restitution, since he'd unknowingly received and spent thousands of dollars in stolen funds. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came during the victim impact statements at Emma's sentencing hearing. Mrs. Patterson, now 84 years old, stood at the podium and spoke directly to Emma with dignity and strength. "Young lady, you didn't just steal money from me. You stole my trust in people, my confidence in my own judgment, and my sense of safety in my own home. You used your sister's good name to manipulate me, which also damaged her reputation in our community. Your actions had consequences far beyond the dollars you took." Mrs. Patterson turned to look at me in the courtroom gallery. "But I want you to know, dear, that your sister's crimes taught me something important about you. You fought for justice when it would have been easier to stay quiet. You protected future victims when your own family was pressuring you to enable her behavior. That takes real courage." When the judge sentenced Emma to 6 years in federal prison, I felt something I hadn't expected: not vindictive satisfaction, but profound sadness for who my sister could have been if she'd chosen differently. Emma had thrown away her freedom, destroyed family relationships, and hurt innocent people, all for money she'd eventually have to repay anyway. After the sentencing, Dad approached me in the courthouse hallway. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, his face drawn with exhaustion and shame. "Savannah, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. I thought I was protecting Emma, but I was actually enabling her criminal behavior. I received stolen money from elderly victims and helped her avoid consequences that might have stopped her crimes earlier." Dad's voice broke as he continued. "I failed you as a father, I failed Emma as a parent, and I failed those elderly victims by protecting someone who was preying on them. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I want you to know I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I chose favoritism over justice." I looked at this man who'd raised me, who'd taught me about right and wrong, who'd inexplicably chosen to protect Emma's criminal behavior over supporting truth and justice. Forgiveness felt impossible in that moment, but I could see genuine remorse in his eyes. "Dad, forgiveness is going to take time, but I'm willing to work on rebuilding trust if you're committed to changing these patterns." 6 months later, Jake and I finally had our wedding at Moonrise Manor. The venue coordinator, Sarah, had been so moved by our story that she allowed us to rebook without an additional deposit. Many family members who'd initially believed Emma's lies attended the wedding and personally apologized for doubting my version of events. But the most meaningful moment came when Mrs. Patterson and 3 other elderly victims attended as honored guests. These brave seniors had become my chosen family, people who'd stood up for justice when my biological family had failed me. During my maid of honor speech, my best friend Sarah mentioned how the experience had revealed my true character. When Savannah discovered her sister's betrayal, she could have quietly handled it within the family. Instead, she chose to protect future victims, even when that choice cost her family support and caused her enormous pain. That's the kind of person I want standing beside me in life. Today, 2 years later, Emma is serving her sentence and has been ordered to undergo extensive therapy for financial crimes addiction. She's written me several letters from prison apologies. I'm not ready to read yet. Dad has continued therapy and slowly begun making amends for his role in enabling her behavior. Mom and I have rebuilt our relationship stronger than before because it's now based on honesty rather than keeping family secrets. The elderly victims have all recovered their stolen funds and formed a support group to help other seniors avoid financial fraud. Mrs. Patterson still calls me every week to check in, and I've learned more about life from her wisdom than I did from years of family dysfunction. Most importantly, Jake and I learned that chosen family people who support justice, truth, and accountability can be stronger than blood relationships built on favoritism and secret keeping. Looking back, Emma's theft of my wedding fund was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and also the best. It exposed family patterns that needed to change, connected me with incredible people who became true allies, and taught me that fighting for justice is always worth it, even when the costs feel overwhelming. Have you ever discovered that family members were betraying you in ways you never imagined? How did you handle learning that people you trusted were actually working against your best interests? Drop a comment below sharing your experience with family betrayal and justice. I love hearing how others found strength during impossible situations. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real family drama stories. Share this video with anyone who's ever felt alone while fighting for what's right against family pressure. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting channels that share real experiences with family dysfunction and recovery. Remember, choosing justice over family loyalty might feel impossible, but sometimes protecting future victims is more important than maintaining family peace. Blood doesn't always mean loyalty, but standing up for what's right always means character.